My name's Emily Pringle. I'm the Head of Learning, Practice and Research here at Tate, and I'm just got a very brief introduction and welcome, and I'm just going to go through the housekeeping for everybody. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if you do hear the fire alarm go off, you need to go down the stairs and out the front door and jump in the river. If you need the toilets, you need to go out that door and carry straight ahead of you down a rather long corridor, but just keep going straight, and the toilets are on your right-hand side. If anybody needs to claim a receipt to claim back the expenses for this from their organisations, they can be collected from the members' desk, which is just outside there. And finally, can I ask everybody to either turn their phones off or put them on silent? And that's it from me. So I'm sure the day is going to be absolutely fantastic, and I'm going to hand you over to Chris Ganley.
Thank you, Emily. Just to say, I'm the Learning and Digital Manager for Artist Rooms, and Artist Rooms is, in case you don't know, a collection which is jointly shared between Tate and National Galleries of Scotland, which tours around the UK. And part of the reason we're looking at developing some of these seminars is that we are becoming increasingly digitally proactive in collaboration with our associates and in partnership with University of Edinburgh, who are leading the research partnership. So I just want to thank Engage, Tate Learning and the Artist Rooms Research Partnership for making this event happen. I also quickly want to thank Arts Council England, the Art Fund and Creative Scotland. I think I'm going to pass you over to Jane Sillis.
Thank you, Chris. And Emily. Lots of thank yous now. So I'm Jane Sillis and I'm Director of Engage. My job really is to introduce Rebecca, who's chairing this morning's session, but I just wanted to do a few more thank yous and tell you a little bit about what's really motivated today's seminar. So it's been a real pleasure developing this seminar with Artist Rooms, the Artist Rooms Research Partnership, and with Tate. And I really just wanted to add to the thanks which have already been given to thank Paul Stewart and other colleagues at Tate who've organised today, Michael Pryor, who's helped as programme coordinator, and also students from the University of Edinburgh who are helping throughout the day, which is brilliant. So just to give you a bit of background, what really motivated this seminar was, I think, a common concern between the partners to really try and find out what's going on in terms of the use of digital technologies and platforms, both within gallery education and in terms of how the visual arts engage with audiences. And I think what we wanted to find out is what's happening now, but also to establish what could happen in the future, and begin to build some intelligence really from a group of colleagues to help us devise research and programs in the future. So I think what we felt was the easy way to do this was to invite a group of colleagues, that's you, from the cultural, higher education and corporate sector to begin to get a sense of what's happening now and to think in quite a futuristic way about what could happen in terms of really exploiting the full potential of digital technologies and platforms. There are two very different panels, a really broad range of exciting and divergent views, but what's really important for us is to get a sense of what you're doing and to capture that. So a lot of this morning and this afternoon is dedicated to you asking questions and also discussing as a group of peers how you're using digital technologies within gallery education practice. So in order to gather all that intelligence, we're filming the day, as you'll have noticed, and we're going to make that film available through all of our websites. But we're also going to ask you, in the tradition of gallery education events, to make notes when you're having your group discussions, because we really want to capture some of the thoughts that you have. They're going to be really important to us in the future. So And I also just wanted to encourage you to tweet about the day. This was a complete sellout. Lots of people wanted to come and were disappointed. So it would be brilliant if you could communicate about the day, and the tweet is on the front of your pack. That's all the introduction I'm going to do. I was going to introduce Rebecca, who's chairing this morning's panel. Dr. Rebecca Sinker is Curator of Digital Learning at Tate. And Rebecca has a really long history of working both within the visual arts and education, but particularly around digital technologies. And I think did a really interesting piece of research with Middlesex University and Innova around that whole area. And Rebecca's been really generous in terms of contributing fantastic ideas and coming up with brilliant ideas for speakers for the seminar today.
Thank you, Jane, Emily and Chris, and welcome everybody. It's really great to be here in our new grand saloon. Yes, I'm going to be chairing the morning session. And as Jane said, I've been working in the field of arts and education, including the use of digital technologies for many moons. Does anyone remember something called Mosaic? A few nods in the audience. An ancient web browser, probably the first browser with a graphical user interface, which is the thing with icons and pictures that we recognize now as a browser. And how about IRC, Internet Relay Chat? Not very many nods around the room. FTP, file transfer protocols? Yes, a few of those. Okay, so that was in the early days of this technology. I was my first involvement with a project in 1994 was with a project called 6 to the N, 6 to the power of N as in the power of infinity. And it was a collaborative project between 6 photographic artists in the UK and Hungary and Canada. And my first experience of using web-based technologies and the other chat room and file transfer technologies to share and collaborate creatively across the web. It was clunky, it was slow, it was unreliable, but the impetus for doing it was about sharing practice across a distance, but in real time. And I think that collaborative impetus is still very much with us and behind a lot of the projects that we're still doing, and indeed behind one of Tate's most successful international collaborative projects, which is the BP Art Exchange, which you'll hear something about later. I think as well as being intrigued and excited by the possibilities of the technology through this project and being able to collaborate with colleagues in Hungary and Canada, the other thing that I was sort of really awakened to during that project was one of my fellow participants, a friend of mine and fellow photographer, Fiona Garfield, absolutely took control of this simultaneous chat, IRC chat technology, precisely because as a deaf person, she was already completely au fait with type talk. So while the rest of us were incredibly slow and getting used to the idea of this simultaneous written conversation, she basically mastered and led the conversation because she was already really adept at the technology. And it made me realize actually there was quite an exciting possibility here for bringing in voices who otherwise and previously and in other contexts were really not heard. So her ideas and her mastery of those techniques were really managed to sort of turn things around in terms of who was leading the conversation. And again, I think that's something that's a common thread in terms of the motivation as to why we are engaged with using these technologies in relation to art and learning, and that is to bring in more and multiple voices and ideas in order to share and collectively create our understandings. So back to today, 20 years ahead of time. And it's actually, I just wanted to say as well, 1994, which was when this happened. 20 years doesn't seem that long, but it's an incredibly long time in the evolution of the technologies we're working with and the kind of involvement and spheres of influence that have changed over that time. And it was also the year that net art was born, the phrase and the practice. So in terms of art practice, there's a history there, often a hidden history, but I know we're going to hear a bit about it from Ruth. So at Tate, digital learning really is about the affordances of digital technologies in relation to learning through and about art. That's to say, what are the processes and practices that are really supported or made better through these technologies that other spaces or platforms or media can't do or do less well. So it's very much driven by the things we want to do and the processes and practices of learning through art, as opposed to the actual software, hardware and technologies themselves. Digital learning exists across the institution. It's spread across learning and digital, particularly all those teams and at all 4 sites in the form of creative digital production and practice and research. I oversee a very small team within the learning department and a number of distinct projects. And these are happening within the gallery and online and via mobile as well. And the current ones that I'm looking at are the Archives and Access project, which is an HLF-funded project to digitise Tate's Artists' Archive and then create an interactive learning hub with new resources, but also new functionality for user-generated content to collate and share and contribute their own materials to make sense of and to create resources around the Artists' Archive and the Tate collection. I'm also involved in a research-led project called Art Maps, which is a mobile learning project exploring the relationship between art and place through mobile technologies. And of course, digital making in the new Taylor Digital Studio, which I think you're all going to get a chance to see over the lunch period. But while I'm overseeing these, it's really important to stress that these are highly collaborative projects. They involve colleagues from different departments and different disciplines across the institution, and of course partners in computer science, in technology development, and artists of various practices as well as teachers and other educators. And they're really part of a strategic move here at Tate to think about developing learning content and production and evaluation in a distributed way across these different departments. So responsibility is distributed and joined up, and the information is shared through a cross-department meeting as well. I've learned from colleagues over the years, particularly people like Ruth with her practices, that network technologies actually function best with network practices. And that is, I think, a really important thing that we've learned and we are learning at Tate. And it is requiring institutional change and a mind shift that is not without its problems. And that's something I think that may be common to some of you as well, that may resonate for you. The point is that with this evolution over the period that I've talked about, the web has moved on from a space where we just publish and tell people about what we're doing to this whole range of interconnected platforms across which we can generate and collaborate and curate and critique and share knowledge amongst ourselves and include the opportunity for co-created knowledge with all of the audiences we work with. So really, we need to be asking the questions about how we can support that collaboration and co-created knowledge for more and more diverse participants. What are the successes and the failures look like in that kind of practice? What are the users' experiences of participation? What does participation even mean in the online and digital sphere? I mean, I think some of these fundamental questions we really haven't addressed or teased out. What is their motivation for learning in this area, and what is their experience of production and learning? What can we learn from our already established and successful practices within gallery education where we're not necessarily working digitally? And what can we learn from each other's successes and failures, and from the opportunities and challenges that are coming up? Very real challenges, particularly economic challenges, but also opportunities for thinking differently and for working differently. That's what we're here for today, to hear from you and from our invited speakers, and to begin that discussion and that shared networked discussion. So I'm just going to run through what we'll do this morning before I invite the first speaker up. So we're going to have 4 speakers presenting, and then after that you'll get a quick opportunity to ask any of them any burning questions. Following that, you will be encouraged and asked to form small groups, and we will give you some questions to address amongst yourselves. Those will then be fed back to the whole group, and then we'll open it up to a much bigger discussion at the end.